Hello, friends. David Miller at my studio, Primordial Creative, and I am making some diaries for YouTube about the projects that I'm working on this year, 2022. It is February 2nd as I record this, and it's going to be a journal entry for making a comic book. So, I've wanted to make a comic book my entire life. I mean, like a fully printed, completed comic. I've made plenty of comic strips. I've done I don't know how many pages of comics that I never actually finished and produced. It definitely is one of the most intense creative experiences you have because much like filmmaking and animation, it's more than just showing up on set, having this 2 hours to find time, taking pictures, taking it home and developing them. Like, photography makes the most sense to me. I've been doing it the most out of all creative endeavors, and music with a close second. You know, the process of making music and putting together an album makes sense to me, but comics, like, you have to have this vision for the whole thing. You have to have a vision for the page. You have to have a vision for what goes in the panels, and if you're doing like a multi-issue story, you have to have a vision for what the whole arc is. So it's like really subdivided in a lot of ways. And more to the point, I don't have a lot of confidence in my drawing ability, or at least I hadn't most of my life. I loved drawing. Like most artists, we all start as drawers. And there was a period in my life where I'm like, oh, this stuff doesn't look realistic. It annoys me. And then I accepted a cartoony style. A lot of my favorite comics anyways are very cartoony, like Gru the Wanderer by Sergio Aragones. It was only a couple years ago that I started getting tools that I really liked, that like really got me excited about drawing, and those were the Pitt soft brush markers. And without doing a lot of penciling to start, just going straight at it with the brush, I found a drawing style that pleased me. I mean, it's not the best in the world for sure, but I feel like it sort of spoke to who I was. Plus the subject matter, I had put out on Instagram stories, hey, send me pictures of yourself as a kid, I'll draw them. Because I was working at elementary school at the time and I could draw kids. People sent me their photos. I have a really close friend who sent me a lot of photos of herself as a child, and I found it was really fun to draw those kids. I started developing a comic strip about my own daughter and the crazy things that she says, named Maddie. And once I started getting a bunch of Maddies done, it's like, okay, how do I letter this thing? That was a process to figure out. I had an iPad Pro, so I was like adding in the sort of like digital Procreate flourishes. And then the pandemic happened and we had the lockdown period, and I drew a lot during that first lockdown, and I was like making comics, just 100% spontaneous. Like, I'm gonna put this panel and then I'm just gonna decide what the next panel is when I get to it. And it's gonna be like this thing that advances really quickly in strange ways. I would take solicitations on Instagram story again for what the next panel should be, you know. It's all fun stuff, but like, it didn't get done. And when I have projects that don't get completed, it eats at me alive. Luckily, I have other things going on creatively that I can't say that it was wasted time, because I was continuing my art photography career, traveling, meeting new people, making some like really small films, making YouTubes, so on and so forth. But 2022, I'm having this period of like intense isolation and heartbreak, and trying to funnel it into the comics. And I took a Neil Gaiman masterclass on writing, which, you know, explores a lot of your own feelings and point of view. And as I've been drawing and thinking about Neil, and you know, drawing comics based on the lyrics of songs like Radiohead songs or whatever I was listening to, I started drawing my dog, and who is mostly the only living creature I was really hanging out with a lot. And you know, a story came out of that, how the dog is getting me through a hard period of my life. And when I finally went back on social media, I'm very talkative on my Instagram story about behavioral psychology, the INFP stuff. I've worked in rehab for teenagers for 8 years. I ran group homes with clients who had, developmental disabilities and behavioral issues. So I have like a long history with behavioralism and psychology, and kind of getting into the autobiographical comics sphere between the Maddie stuff and the stuff with my dog Yoshi. It just started flowing that this is what I really should be talking about. And I'm getting more into things like Harvey Pekar. The Dancing After 10 was a graphic novel I picked up at the local library. Just kind of like looking at the styles of people who do autobiographical material. And it's so far removed from like superhero stuff, but they're very creative, and then that artwork doesn't have to be matched up with what is in a regular Marvel or DC title, That's really appealing to me. I'm also a big fan of like Jeff Lemire and Matt Kint. They have very quick, sketchy art styles. I find it incredibly appealing, and I find it that it matches with kind of what I'm doing. So it's February 2nd, as I said. I'm about 2 months into my comics art project, and I'm also working on an animated film. I'm going to start doing some actual filmmaking, get back into it with some of my art model and actress friends, and see where it goes for the rest of the year. But, I wanted it to be all in one piece. And because my studio is Primordial Creative, it's as much about me as it is about the things that might look a little more polished, fashiony, fictional, fantastical. We're gonna see where it goes, but I think I'm about a month away from getting stories completed. The scanning process takes a while, and then doing things like developing my own font I've already done. I'm not really worried about the writing process at this stage. I know what'll probably happen is I'll drink a ton of caffeine. I'll get like a triple shot at the place, and then just dialogue the whole thing in one sitting, and then sit on it for a week, and then look back and see what it is. But big influence from the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel. Already this week, Ed Piskor and Jim Rugg in their conversations, they mentioned like one thing talking about, it was an older episode, and they talked about the Kraven's Last Hunt storyline written by J.M. DeMatteis and drawn by Mike Zeck in Spider-Man, and how there were pages of purple prose over this character Vermin running around the city. And Ed thought that they'd be so much better without any dialogue. And I realized, my depressive character, my Yoshi story, the analog for myself, I don't need to put my own whiny thoughts on the page, especially if it's going to be from the dog's point of view, or if the visuals just get it across. And that was important to me. I want to actually hear the dialogue from the dog's point of view, and I don't really care what my own thoughts are, because I think the visuals tell how sad and heartbroken and miserable I was during that period. So that's enough. All right, end of Journal 1.